The Zeleran Empire stood as a testament to power and dominance across 3 star systems. For centuries, they had cultivated a culture of superiority, their technology advancing at an exponential rate that left other civilizations in awe. Their massive capital ships, with hulls gleaming like polished obsidian under distant suns, were symbols of their military might. The Zeleran leadership structure was built on a strict hierarchy that valued strength above all else, with the High Council making decisions that affected billions across their territories. Colonel Celine Maris gazed through the viewport of her command ship, the Dominion. As commander of the Zeleran Vanguard fleet, she had earned her position through brilliance in strategy and unwavering loyalty to the Empire. Her angular features, framed by silver-white hair kept in a tight military cut, reflected the cold light of distant stars. Celine had spent decades perfecting her craft, rising through the ranks with a calculated precision that matched her tactical genius. Colonel called her executive officer, Major Lena Voss. "We're approaching the Aurora system. Long-range scans confirm the human colony is still there." Celine nodded. The human colony of New Aurora sat at the edge of Zeleran space, a point of contention for the High Council for years. Established in 2465, the colony had grown from a small research outpost to a thriving settlement of 42,000 souls. Families had been born there, businesses had flourished, and a unique culture had begun to form, a blend of Earth traditions and adaptations to their new home. New Aurora was a beautiful world with sprawling oceans of deep turquoise and landmasses covered in vegetation that shimmered with purple and blue hues under its yellow sun. The humans had built their primary settlement along a coastal region, where massive cliffs provided natural protection against the seasonal storms. They worked hard to respect the local ecosystem, developing sustainable farming methods and energy systems that worked in harmony with the planet's natural cycles. Thomas Sheen stood on his porch watching his children play in the yard of their prefabricated home. As a third-generation colonist, he had never known Earth except through stories and holovids. His wife, Maria, joined him, slipping her hand into his. "The council meeting went well," she said. "They're voting tomorrow on the new education initiative. I think we'll finally get approval for the expanded curriculum." Thomas smiled. "That's good. The kids need to learn about both worlds, Earth culture and Zeleran traditions. If we're going to coexist peacefully, understanding is key." Maria's face clouded slightly. "There have been rumors, though. Some say the Zelerans are unhappy with our expansion into the Eastern Territories." "It's all approved," Thomas reassured her. "We followed every provision of the Border Act to the letter." Little did they know that far above them, in the cold vacuum of space, decisions were being made that would render their careful compliance meaningless. On the Dominion, Celine received her orders directly from Lord Arvok, the most hawkish member of the Zeleran High Council. His holographic projection towered in the command center, his ornate uniform and severe expression conveying authority that transcended the light years between them. "Colonel Maris," his voice resonated through the chamber. "The High Council has determined that the human settlement on New Aurora constitutes a violation of the Border Act. Their continued expansion threatens our security interests in the Aurora system." Celine maintained her composure, though internally she questioned this assessment. "My intelligence suggests they've remained within the designated boundaries, Lord Arvok." The counselor's expression hardened. "Your intelligence is incomplete. We have evidence of human scouts beyond the Eastern Territories. Moreover, their very presence encourages other species to encroach upon our borders." His tone left no room for debate. "You will execute Operation Cleansing. The colony is to be removed." Celine felt her blood run cold. "Removed, sir." "Completely," Arvok confirmed. "This will serve as a necessary demonstration of Zeleran resolve. The operation begins in 6 hours." As the hologram faded, Celine turned to find Major Voss watching her intently. "Orders, Colonel?" the younger officer asked. For a moment, Celine hesitated. Throughout her career, she had carried out difficult orders, but none like this. 42,000 civilians. The tactical part of her mind already calculated the firepower needed the most efficient approach to bombardment, the expected casualty rate. The human part of her mind recoiled. "Prepare the fleet," she finally said. "Full combat readiness. I want precision targeting solutions for all major infrastructure points." "And evacuation protocols?" Voss asked, her voice carefully neutral. Selene met her gaze. "There will be no evacuation." 6 hours later, the sky above New Aurora erupted with fire. The Zeleran fleet, positioned in high orbit, unleashed a barrage of kinetic weapons and energy beams that cut through the colony's minimal defenses like paper. The atmospheric repercussions alone crushed buildings and tore through the settlement's power grid. In the Colonial Administration building, emergency alarms blared as officials scrambled to understand what was happening. Governor Elena Winters shouted into a communication terminal, desperate to establish contact with the Zeleran ships. "This is Governor Winters of New Aurora. We are a civilian settlement. Please cease fire. We request immediate dialogue." Her pleas went unanswered as another volley of weapons fire struck nearby, collapsing half the building. Elena was thrown across the room, debris crushing her legs. Through the gaping hole in the wall, she could see the devastation spreading across the colony buildings, crumbling fires, raging people running in terror. Thomas Sheen had just enough time to gather his family in their home's emergency shelter, a reinforced room beneath the house, designed to withstand natural disasters, not orbital bombardment. Maria clutched their children close as the world above them shook and groaned. "It'll be okay," Thomas lied, trying to keep his voice steady for the children. "Earth will send help." But when the direct hits came, pulverizing the ground and triggering massive shockwaves, even the shelter couldn't withstand the assault. The ceiling cracked, then collapsed, burying the Sheen family, along with their hopes and dreams for a future on New Aurora. The bombardment continued for 47 minutes. When it finally ceased, New Aurora was unrecognizable. Where a thriving colony had stood, only smoking craters and pulverized ruins remained. The beautiful coastal cliffs had partially collapsed into the sea, and fires raged across the landscape, consuming the unique purple-blue vegetation. Aboard the Dominion, Selene, Maris watched the sensor readouts confirm what she already knew. No significant life signs remained in the colony zone. Operation Cleansing was complete. She had followed her orders to perfection. Yet, as she stared at the tactical display showing the devastated planet's surface, she felt no pride, no sense of accomplishment, only a hollow emptiness that threatened to consume her from within. "Send confirmation to High Command," she instructed Major Voss, her voice flat. "The human colony has been neutralized." As the Zeleran fleet prepared to depart the Auriga system, none of them realized that a small, automated beacon had survived the attack, broadcasting a distress signal toward Earth. The message, traveling through subspace, would reach human space in just under 3 days. When it did, everything would change. Lieutenant General Adrian Ross stood ramrod straight in the war room of Earth Alliance headquarters, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic display of the Auriga system. At 63, Ross had seen humanity's expansion into the stars from its earliest days, serving in various capacities from frontier security to diplomatic missions. The streaks of gray in his dark hair and the lines etching his brown face spoke of decades of service. Around him, the atmosphere was charged with tension as military and civilian leaders alike absorbed the devastating news from New Aurora. The automated distress beacon had transmitted full sensor logs of the attack, including visual records that left nothing to the imagination. 42,000 civilians, said Admiral Helena Chen, her voice tight with controlled fury. Men, women, children. No warning, no declaration of hostilities. Just obliterated. President Eliza Morgan, joining via secure holographic link from the Alliance capital, closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, her gaze was steel. Options, General Ross. Adrian had been preparing for this moment since the first report arrived. Madam President, the Zeleran Empire has made its position clear. They view our expansion, any expansion, as a threat to their dominance. This wasn't a military operation against combatants. It was a message. And how do you propose we respond to this message? Asked Defense Secretary Javier Rodriguez. Adrian gestured to the holographic display, expanding it to show a wider view of regional space. The Zelerans expect us to either retreat or launch a conventional military response, neither of which ends well for humanity. They outnumber our fleet 3-1, and their homeworld defenses are considered impenetrable. He paused, then continued. But there is another option, Operation Mirror Glass. The room fell silent. Only a handful of people in the entire alliance had clearance to know about Mirror Glass, a contingency plan developed for a scenario that until 3 days ago had seemed unlikely. "You can't be serious," whispered Morgan Talebi, the science minister. "That technology is theoretical at best, catastrophic at worst." "Not theoretical anymore," Adrian replied, his voice grim. "Dr. Mara Ellings and her team completed successful testing last year. It works." President Morgan leaned forward, her holographic image flickering slightly. "Explain it to everyone present, General, in simple terms." Adrian nodded. Project Nemesis is a stellar manipulation technology. In essence, it can trigger an artificial process similar to stellar collapse in a controlled manner. We can target the Zeleran home star Verisa and initiate what scientists call unraveling, not a full supernova, but a massive release of energy that would render their home system uninhabitable. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Secretary Rodriguez spoke first. "That's not a military response, that's genocide." "Which is exactly what they committed against New Aurora," countered Admiral Chen. Adrian raised his hand. "The technology allows for precision. We can calibrate the effect to destroy their military and governmental infrastructure while giving civilian populations time to evacuate. This isn't about vengeance. It's about ending the Zeleran threat permanently while minimizing civilian casualties." For 3 hours, the debate raged. Some argued for conventional warfare, others for diplomatic isolation, a few even for surrender. But as reports continued to arrive from other human colonies expressing fear of similar Zeleran attacks, the mood shifted. Finally, President Morgan spoke. "I never imagined making this kind of decision when I took office. But I cannot allow another New Aurora to happen." She took a deep breath. "General Ross, you have authorization to proceed with Operation Mirror Glass. God help us all." As the meeting disbanded, Adrian remained in the war room, studying the holographic representation of the Zeleran home system. He felt a presence behind him and turned to find Dr. Mara Ellings, the brilliant physicist who had developed the core technology behind Project Nemesis. "So they approved it," she said quietly, her slight frame seeming smaller under the weight of what was to come. Adrian nodded. "We deploy in 12 hours. Mara moved beside him, her eyes fixed on the pulsing light that represented Verisa. "I created this technology to harness energy for peaceful purposes, to solve humanity's resource problems. Not this." "The Zelerans gave us no choice," Adrian replied, though the words felt hollow even to him. "You've seen the projections. If we don't stop them now, they'll systematically eliminate our colonies one by one. And we're better than them because our genocide will be more efficient." Mara challenged, anger flashing in her eyes. Adrian turned to face her fully. "No, we're better because we'll give their people a chance to survive, which is more than they gave ours." He paused. "Your micro-drones will penetrate their defenses and initiate the process slowly enough for evacuation vessels to launch. Military targets will be prioritized. It's the best compromise we can make between justice and mercy." Mara's shoulders slumped. "There's no such compromise, General. Just degrees of horror." She turned to leave, then stopped. "When this is over, when you've seen what Nemesis really does to a star system, remember that power like this comes with responsibility. If humanity survives the coming storm, we'll need to be better than we were before." After she left, Adrian stood alone, the weight of 42,000 dead colonists, balanced against the millions of Zelerans who would soon face the destruction of their home. He wondered if in their place he would see any difference between justice and revenge. Aboard the Dominion Colonel, Celine Maris found herself unable to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the burning colony imagine the screams she had been too far away to hear. The mission had been completed 4 days ago, and the fleet was now returning to Zeleran space at standard velocity. She stood in her private quarters reviewing reports on a datapad when Major Voss requested entry. "Come," Celine called, setting the pad aside. Lina Voss entered, her posture perfect as always, but something in her eyes betrayed inner conflict. "Colonel, I've received disturbing reports from our intelligence network. Earth Alliance forces are mobilizing." Celine frowned. "That's expected. They'll want to fortify their remaining colonies." "No, ma'am. This is different." Lina handed over a data crystal. "They're assembling their entire Fifth Fleet, including vessels that were previously on deep space assignments. Multiple ships equipped with experimental technology have departed Earth's solar system." Celine inserted the crystal into her terminal, scanning the information quickly. "They must know they can't win in direct combat. Even their most advanced vessels are no match for our planetary defenses." "There's more," Lina continued. "One of our deep cover agents reported significant activity at a research facility called Project Nemesis before going dark 3 days ago. The project is classified at the highest levels, but rumors suggest it involves stellar manipulation technology." Celine felt a chill run through her. "Stellar manipulation? You mean weapons that could affect stars?" "Theoretical, according to our science division," Lina replied. "But if they've made a breakthrough—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Celine turned to the viewport, gazing at the streaking stars as the ship moved through space. The operation against New Aurora had been presented as a necessary security measure, a show of force to discourage further human expansion. But what if it had instead provoked a response far more devastating than the High Council had anticipated? "Send an encrypted message to Lord Arvok," she decided. "Inform him of these developments and request permission to divert the fleet to reinforce Veresa's defenses." "Yes, Colonel," Lina acknowledged, turning to leave. "Lina," Celine called, stopping her. "Off the record, do you believe we did the right thing at New Aurora?" The Major hesitated, her usual confidence faltering. "I believe we followed orders, ma'am." "That's not what I asked." Lina met her gaze directly. "No, Colonel. I don't believe it was right, but I don't see what choice we had." After Lina departed, Celine returned to the viewport, haunted by the premonition that the consequences of New Aurora were only beginning to unfold. For the first time in her distinguished career, she questioned not just a specific order, but the entire ideology that had produced it. The Zeleran way valued strength above all else. But what if that strength had become their greatest weakness? Lieutenant General Adrian Ross stood on the bridge of the Alliance flagship Retribution, leading a fleet of 27 vessels toward Zeleran space. The journey would take 7 days using conventional propulsion systems, followed by a synchronized FTL jump directly into the Veresa system, a maneuver that would bypass the extensive early warning networks the Zelerans had established along their borders. Beside him, Admiral Chen studied tactical displays, showing the projected positions of Zeleran defense vessels. "Their home fleet consists of approximately 60 capital ships, plus support vessels," she noted. "We'll be outnumbered more than 2 to 1. "Numbers won't matter," Adrian replied, "if Dr. Elling's technology works as designed." As if summoned by her name, Mara Ellings entered the bridge, accompanied by her research team. The physicist had abandoned her usual lab attire for a standard Alliance uniform, though she wore no rank insignia. The past several days had taken their toll. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her movements betrayed exhaustion. "Status report," Dr. Adrian requested. Mara gestured to one of her colleagues, who activated a holographic display in the center of the bridge. A detailed, 3-dimensional model of the Veresa star appeared pulsing with energy. Virisa is a Type G star similar to Earth's Sun, but approximately 15% larger, she explained. The Zeleran homeworld orbits at a distance of 143 million kilometers, with their major military installations concentrated on the second and fourth planets, plus extensive orbital platforms. She manipulated the display, zooming in on the star's core. Project Nemesis works by introducing specially engineered microdrones into the star's convection layer. Each drone is approximately the size of a dust particle, but contains advanced quantum circuitry capable of affecting subatomic interactions. Another scientist, a tall man with a shock of white hair, continued the explanation. Once in position, the drones create a cascading disruption in the star's fusion processes. It's like removing key threads from a tapestry. Eventually, the entire structure begins to unravel. The resulting energy discharge will be directed outward along the star's equatorial plane, affecting all planets in the system, but particularly those housing military installations. Adrian studied the simulation. As it played out the expected sequence, the microdrones penetrating the star's outer layers. The initial disruption at the core, the massive release of solar energy that would sweep through the Zeleran system like a divine judgment. And the time frame, he asked. From deployment to full effect, approximately 26 hours, Mara answered. The initial phase will produce noticeable stellar activity, but nothing immediately catastrophic. This should provide time for civilian evacuations as promised. Her tone made clear her continuing moral reservations. Adrian nodded, turning to address the bridge crew. I want to be absolutely clear about our mission parameters. We are not targeting Zeleran civilians. Our primary objectives are their military assets and governmental infrastructure. The Nemesis technology has been calibrated to maximize evacuation time for population centers. He paused, making eye contact with each senior officer in turn. This is not a conventional war. We're not fighting for territory or resources. We're fighting to ensure that what happened to New Aurora never happens again to any human settlement. The Zeleran leadership has demonstrated their willingness to commit genocide when it suits their purposes. We will show them, and the galaxy, that such actions have consequences. As the briefing concluded, and the officers returned to their stations, Adrian found himself alone with Mara near the tactical display. 26 hours, she said quietly. That's the theoretical window. In practice, once the process begins, we'll have limited control over exactly how the star responds. The unraveling could accelerate unexpectedly. Adrian's jaw tightened. Are you saying we might not be able to provide the evacuation time we've planned for? I'm saying that stellar physics is complex and we're attempting something unprecedented, Mara replied. We've run thousands of simulations, but this will be the first actual deployment. There are variables we simply can't predict with complete accuracy. Then we'll need to be prepared to adjust, Adrian said firmly. If we detect a faster progression than anticipated, we'll broadcast evacuation warnings directly to the Zeleran population centers, bypassing their military channels if necessary. Mara studied him, her expression grave. Even with warnings, millions could die, General. Are you prepared to live with that? Adrian looked away, his gaze falling on a small, holographic representation of New Aurora that he kept at his personal station. The once beautiful colony was now just a scarred, lifeless rock. I'm already living with the deaths I couldn't prevent, he answered. At least this time the people dying will have a chance to escape. 6 days later, the Earth Alliance fleet reached the final jump point. In less than an hour, they would make the synchronized FTL transition directly into the heart of Zeleran space, a tactic that had never been attempted on this scale before. As the countdown proceeded, Adrian received a priority communication from President Morgan. General, she began, her holographic image betraying the strain of the past week. I've just received a communique from the Zeleran High Council. They're offering to negotiate. Adrian's pulse quickened. What are their terms? They propose a non-aggression pact. They'll recognize current human territorial holdings and promise no further attacks on our colonies. She paused. In exchange, they want us to halt our fleet's advance and agree to limited expansion restrictions. For a moment, hope flared in Adrian's chest. Then, reality reasserted itself. They know we're coming, he realized aloud. Their intelligence must have detected our fleet movements, and they're trying to buy time to reinforce their defenses. That's the consensus of our intelligence division as well, President Morgan confirmed. Still, if there's any possibility of resolving this without further bloodshed. Adrian shook his head firmly. Madam President, the Zelerans understand only one language power. They're offering negotiation not because they've had a moral awakening, but because they fear what we might be capable of. If we back down now, they'll interpret it as weakness, and New Aurora will have died for nothing. The President's expression hardened. Then, you believe we should proceed with Operation Mirror Glass? I do, Adrian confirmed. But I also believe we should respond to their offer, not with acceptance, but with our own terms. Tell them we demand the immediate surrender of all those responsible for the New Aurora massacre, starting with the High Council members who ordered it, and the fleet commanders who carried it out. They'll never agree to that. No, they won't, Adrian acknowledged. But it will keep their attention focused on diplomatic channels while we complete our mission. And it will make clear that this isn't about territory or politics. It's about justice for 42,000 murdered civilians. After a long moment, President Morgan nodded. Proceed as planned, General. May God forgive us if we're wrong. As the communication ended, Adrian turned to the bridge where officers awaited his final orders. All ships prepare for synchronized jump. Operation Mirror Glass is a go. Aboard the Dominion, now in orbit around Verisa Prime, the Zeleran homeworld colonel, Celine Maris, received the distressing news with outward calm that belied her inner turmoil. So they've rejected our terms. Lord Arvok's holographic image declared his aristocratic features twisted with disdain. Typical human arrogance. They actually believe they can challenge the might of the Zeleran Empire. Their counterproposal is specific, my lord. Celine noted reading from the diplomatic communication. They demand the surrender of all officials responsible for the New Aurora operation, including members of the High Council and the fleet commander who executed the attack. She met Arvok's gaze steadily. That would include me. Arvok dismissed the notion with a wave. Absurd. They have no means of enforcing such demands. Our intelligence suggests their fleet, while substantial, consists of only 20 to 30 vessels. They cannot hope to penetrate our defenses. Unless they possess technology we haven't accounted for, Celine countered, thinking of the troubling reports about Project Nemesis. I recommend we at least consider. You recommend, Arvok's voice turned dangerous. You forget yourself, Colonel. You are not paid to recommend policy to the High Council. You are paid to execute our will, as you did at New Aurora. Celine felt her jaw tighten, but maintained her composure. Of course, my lord. I merely suggest that tactical flexibility might be prudent. Your advice is noted, Arvok replied coldly. Now you have your orders. The Homeworld Defense Fleet is under your command. Destroy any human vessels that approach our space. No negotiation, no prisoners. As the transmission ended, Celine turned to find Major Voss, waiting at a respectful distance. Status report, she requested. All ships are at combat readiness, Lina confirmed. Orbital defense platforms are fully powered, and planetary shield generators are operating at maximum capacity. If the humans attack, they'll face the most formidable defensive network in known space. Celine nodded, moving to the tactical display that showed the Verisa system in meticulous detail. Their fleet movements suggest they plan to approach from the outer system, possibly using the asteroid belt for cover. Position our scout vessels accordingly. As Lina relayed the orders, Celine found herself torn between her duty as a Zeleran officer and her growing moral discomfort. The massacre at New Aurora haunted her, not just for the lives lost, but for what it revealed about the empire she had served without question for so long. If the humans attacked now, More lives would be lost. Zeleran lives this time. And for what pride dominance? The right to expand endlessly into the stars, without regard for other civilizations. Her reflections were interrupted by a sudden alarm from the sensor station. "Colonel," called the officer on duty. "Multiple FTL signatures detected. They're inside the inner defensive perimeter." Celine rushed to the console shock, overriding her training momentarily. "That's impossible. No ship can make a precision jump that close to a star's gravity well." Yet the evidence was irrefutable. 27 Earth Alliance vessels had appeared, seemingly from nowhere, bypassing all the carefully placed early warning systems, all the outer defensive lines that should have given them hours of preparation time. The human fleet was arranged in a precise formation around Verisa itself, maintaining position just beyond the corona of the Zeleran home star. Battle stations. Celine ordered professional instincts, taking over. All vessels moved to intercept, planetary defense grid to full power. But even as the Zeleran fleet began to respond, strange readings appeared on the sensor displays. Hundreds, then thousands, then millions of tiny objects were deploying from the human vessels, heading not toward the planets or the defense fleet, but directly into the star itself. "What are they doing?" Lina asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Celine watched in growing horror as understanding dawned. The rumors about stellar manipulation technology weren't just rumors. The humans weren't attacking the Zeleran Empire in conventional terms. They were attacking the very heart of the Zeleran system. "Target those objects," she commanded. "Use point defense systems, fighter screens, everything we have." The Zeleran vessels opened fire energy weapons and projectiles, streaking through space toward the cloud of microdrones. Some found their targets tiny flashes, marking successful hits, but for every drone destroyed thousands more, continued their inexorable journey into the churning plasma of Verisa. "Colonel," the science officer reported, panic edging his voice. "We're detecting unusual energy fluctuations within the star's core. Something is disrupting the fusion reactions." Celine felt as though the deck were dropping away beneath her feet. If the humans had found a way to destabilize Verisa, the entire system, billions of lives would be at risk. "Open a channel to the human flagship," she ordered, ignoring the shocked looks from her bridge crew. "Colonel, the High Council has forbidden direct communication with—" "Open the channel," Celine snapped, cutting off the communications officer's protest. "Now." When the connection was established, Celine found herself face to face with a stern-looking human male, wearing the insignia of an Earth Alliance lieutenant general. "This is Colonel Celine Maris of the Zeleran Defense Fleet." She began maintaining her dignity, despite the circumstances. "You have entered sovereign Zeleran space in an act of war, and are deploying what appears to be a weapon of mass destruction against our home star. I demand an immediate cessation of hostilities." The human general's expression remained impassive. "I am Lieutenant General Adrian Ross of the Earth Alliance. You're in no position to make demands, Colonel Maris. Not after New Aurora." Celine felt the weight of 42,000 deaths pressing down upon her. "What exactly are you doing to our star?" "We call it Project Nemesis." Ross answered, a hint of grim satisfaction in his voice. "Your scientists would probably call it induced stellar unraveling. In simple terms, we're causing Verisa to temporarily release massive amounts of energy in a controlled manner." "You're threatening our entire civilization," Celine protested. "Just as you threatened ours," Ross countered. "The difference is, we're giving your people a chance to survive. In approximately 24 hours, Verisa will release an equatorial energy discharge that will destroy all military installations in the system. Prior to that, there will be increasingly severe solar storms. I suggest you begin evacuating civilian population centers immediately." Celine struggled to maintain her composure. "You can't possibly control something like that with precision. Millions of innocent people will die." For the first time, something like regret flickered across Ross's face. "That's why I'm contacting you directly, Colonel. Your High Council refused our terms. They're willing to sacrifice your people rather than accept responsibility for their actions. I'm giving you a chance to save as many lives as possible." Before Selene could respond, Lord Arvok's voice thundered from behind her. "What is the meaning of this?" The counselor had arrived on the bridge, unannounced, his face contorted with rage. "Cut this transmission immediately." Selene held her ground. "My lord, the humans have deployed some kind of stellar weapon. They claim Virisa will release a catastrophic energy discharge in 24 hours. We need to begin evacuation procedures." "Evacuation," Arvok sneered. "The Zeleran Empire does not flee. We have faced threats before, and emerged triumphant. This is nothing but a desperate bluff from an inferior species." On the view screen, General Ross shook his head. "It's no bluff, Counselor. Sensors on your own vessels will confirm that Virisa's core is already beginning to destabilize. The process cannot be reversed once initiated." "If you truly believe you can destroy our homeworld," Arvok snarled, "then know this: our surviving fleets will hunt down every human settlement, every colony, every outpost until your species is nothing but a memory. We will make new Aurora look like mercy." Ross's expression hardened. "That's exactly why we're doing this, Counselor. You've proven you're willing to commit genocide when it suits you. We're simply making sure you never get the chance again." Arvok turned to Selene. "Prepare all weapons. Target their vessels. If they want war, we will oblige them." Selene hesitated, torn between her oath to the Empire and the desperate need to save civilian lives. "Sir, if they're telling the truth about Virisa, we don't have time for a conventional battle. We need to focus on evacuation." "That is an order, Colonel," Arvok roared. "Or would you prefer to be relieved of command for insubordination?" For a moment, that seemed to stretch into eternity, Selene stood at the crossroads of her life. Everything she had worked for, everything she had believed in, balanced against the lives of billions of her people. "No, my lord," she said at last, her decision made. "I would not prefer that." In one fluid motion, she drew her sidearm and fired the energy pulse, striking Arvok directly in the chest. The counselor collapsed, more shocked than injured. The weapon had been set to stun. Colonel Maris Lina gasped. "What have you done?" Selene turned back to the view screen where General Ross watched with undisguised surprise. "I need confirmation, General. How much time do we realistically have, and what areas will be most affected?" Ross recovered quickly, gesturing to someone off-screen. A moment later, a human woman with short, dark hair joined him. "This is Dr. Mara Ellings, the scientist responsible for Project Nemesis," he introduced. "She can provide the technical details." Dr. Ellings stepped forward, her expression grave but determined. "Colonel, the energy discharge will be most intense along Virisa's equatorial plane. Planets and installations within that plane will be most severely affected. The discharge will consist primarily of high-energy plasma and intense radiation. Your fourth planet will be destroyed completely. The homeworld, being slightly above the equatorial plane, will experience severe damage to its southern hemisphere, but may remain partially habitable in northern regions." "And the time frame?" Selene pressed. 24 hours was our conservative estimate," Mara admitted. "But the process is accelerating faster than our models predicted. I would plan for no more than 20 hours before the main discharge, with increasing solar activity beginning much sooner." Selene made her calculations quickly. Not enough time for a full planetary evacuation, but enough to save a significant portion of the population. She turned to Lena. "Major Voss, have Counselor Arvok confined to quarters. Then send emergency broadcast to all civilian centers. Priority evacuation for children and medical facilities. All available vessels, including military transports, are to be reassigned to evacuation duty immediately." Lina hesitated for only a second before nodding. "Yes, Colonel." Selene returned her attention to Ross. "I'm declaring a unilateral ceasefire and dedicating all resources to civilian evacuation. Will your fleet assist with rescue operations, or did your vengeance not account for that possibility?" A flicker of something respect perhaps crossed Ross's features. "We came prepared for multiple scenarios, Colonel. Our ships carry additional life support modules and emergency provisions. We'll maintain position to monitor Verisa, but deploy support vessels to assist with evacuation efforts." "Why would you help us?" Celine asked, genuinely puzzled. "After what we did to your colony." Ross's expression turned somber. "Because the soldiers who murdered those colonists were following orders just as you were. The difference is, you've chosen to break that chain of command to save your people. That's a choice worth honoring." As the transmission ended, Celine turned to her crew, who watched her with expressions ranging from shock to outright hostility. "I know what I've done constitutes treason under Zeleran law," she acknowledged. "Anyone who wishes to place me under arrest may do so after we've evacuated as many civilians as possible. Until then, we have work to do." To her surprise, Lina stepped forward. "Your orders, Colonel." One by one, the other officers returned to their stations, choice made. The Zeleran Empire might value strength above all else, but perhaps there was strength too in knowing when to set aside pride for survival. Over the next 18 hours, the Verisa system became the setting for the most desperate evacuation in recorded history. As the star began to visibly pulsate, emitting increasingly violent solar flares, ships of all descriptions from massive colony vessels to personal yachts filled the spaceways, carrying as many Zelerans as possible away from the doomed system. The Earth Alliance vessels, true to Ross's word, provided assistance where they could, their shuttles ferrying refugees to larger ships and distributing emergency supplies. Still, everyone knew the brutal truth. Despite their best efforts, billions would die when Verisa finally released its catastrophic discharge. Aboard the Dominion, which had remained in orbit around Verisa Prime to coordinate the evacuation, Celine worked tirelessly, ignoring exhaustion as she directed rescue efforts and prioritized evacuation zones. She had not slept in over 30 hours, and it showed in her haggard appearance and the slight tremor in her hands. "Colonel," Lina approached, offering a stimulant tablet and water. "You need to maintain your strength." Celine accepted gratefully. "Status report. We've evacuated approximately 30% of the capital city and surrounding regions," Lina reported. "Most children and critical medical patients are off-planet. But," she hesitated. "Speak freely, Major. At current rates, we'll only save about 20% of the total planetary population before Dr. Ellings's deadline. And the other planets in the system, the mining colonies, the research stations, their evacuation percentages are even lower." Celine closed her eyes briefly, the weight of those numbers crushing down upon her. Billions of lives would be lost, and for what? Border dispute, imperial pride. The right to demonstrate Zeleran power by destroying a human colony. For the first time in her life, Celine found herself questioning not just individual orders, but the entire foundation of Zeleran society. Their obsession with strength and dominance had led them to commit an atrocity against New Aurora. And now, the consequences of that action would reshape their civilization forever. "Colonel," the communications officer called urgently, "we're receiving reports of significant stellar activity. Verisa is changing." Celine moved to the viewport, where the sight that greeted her defied comprehension. The Zeleran homestar, once a steady, golden-yellow orb, now pulsed with angry red energy. Massive prominences extended millions of kilometers into space, writhing like living things. The star's surface appeared to be rippling, as though some immense force were stirring it from within. "How much time?" she demanded. Before anyone could answer, a priority communication came through. General Ross's face appeared on the main view screen, his expression grim. "Colonel Maris, our scientists report that the stellar unraveling has reached a critical phase much sooner than anticipated. You have less than 2 hours before the main discharge." Celine felt the blood drain from her face. 2 hours? That's not nearly enough time to— "I know," Ross cut in. "We're redirecting all available vessels to your coordinates. But you need to prepare for the worst. The initial shockwave will disable most ships still in the inner system." As the magnitude of the disaster became clear, Celine made her final decision. "General, I request permission to come aboard your vessel. Ross's brow furrowed. For what purpose? To surrender myself as the commander responsible for New Aurora, Selene replied steadily. If justice is what you seek, then let it fall on those truly responsible, not on the billions of innocent Zelerans who had no part in that decision. For a long moment, Ross studied her, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once. Permission granted, Colonel. We'll send a shuttle. After ending the transmission, Selene turned to Lina. Major Voss, you are hereby promoted to Colonel and given command of the Dominion. Get this ship and as many civilians as you can to the jump point before the discharge hits. Lina's eyes widened in shock. You're not coming with us. Someone needs to answer for New Aurora, Selene replied quietly. Better me than our entire civilization. It was the High Council's order, Lina protested. You were following. Following orders is not an excuse, Selene interrupted firmly. Not for something like that. I made my choice when I gave the command to fire, just as I made my choice when I stunned Lord Arvok. Now I'm making this choice. Before Lina could argue further, Selene embraced her briefly. Save as many as you can, Colonel Voss. And when you rebuild, remember this day. Remember what brought us here. 30 minutes later, Selene Maris stood in the shuttle bay of the Earth Alliance flagship Retribution, facing General Adrian Ross and Dr. Mara Ellings. A contingent of armed human marines stood at attention nearby, though whether they were an honor guard or prison escort, Selene couldn't tell. Colonel Maris, Ross, greeted her formally. On behalf of the Earth Alliance, I accept your surrender. Selene removed her command insignia and offered it to him. I take full responsibility for the destruction of New Aurora Colony. I was the fleet commander who executed the attack. Ross accepted the insignia, studying it briefly before pocketing it. And the orders came from the High Council. From Lord Arvok specifically, Selene confirmed. But the responsibility for carrying them out was mine. I could have refused. At the cost of your career, possibly your life, Mara Ellings observed. Selene met the scientist's gaze steadily. Yes, a price I should have been willing to pay. Ross gestured for the Marines to stand down. You'll be detained aboard this vessel until we return to Earth Alliance space, where you'll face formal charges for the New Aurora massacre. I understand, Selene acknowledged. But first I would like to witness what happens to my home. After a moment's consideration, Ross nodded. Follow me to the bridge. Together, they watched as Verisa underwent its final transformation. The star's surface roiled with unimaginable energies, vast sections seeming to tear away from the main body before being pulled back in by gravity. Instruments registered wild fluctuations in radiation temperature and magnetic fields. How many, Selene asked quietly, how many of my people will die today? Ross didn't sugarcoat the truth. Our estimates suggest approximately 4 billion on Verisa Prime alone. Another 3 billion on the other planets and stations throughout the system. 7 billion lives. Nearly 2/3 of the entire Zeleran population gone in a single, cataclysmic event. The scale of the tragedy defied comprehension. Was there no other way? Selene whispered more to herself than to the humans beside her. It was Dr. Ellings who answered, her voice heavy with the burden of her creation. We asked ourselves the same question after New Aurora. We searched for alternatives, for some diplomatic solution that wouldn't lead to more violence. She paused. But your High Council made it clear either we submitted to Zeleran dominance or we faced extinction colony by colony. So instead you developed a weapon that could destroy an entire star system, Selene observed without accusation. Project Nemesis wasn't originally a weapon, Mara insisted. It was designed as an energy harvesting technology, a way to safely extract plasma from stars to power human expansion without depleting planetary resources. The military application was an adaptation. Before Selene could respond, alarms blared across the bridge. Energy spike, called out a sensor officer. Massive discharge building. All vessels maximum range, Ross ordered. Prepare for shockwave. On the main view screen, Verisa seemed to contract momentarily, its surface drawing inward as though taking a final breath. Then, with a violence that no words could adequately describe it, erupted. A massive ring of superheated plasma burst from the star's equator, expanding outward at a significant fraction of light speed. The energy discharge swept through the Verisa system like divine wrath, engulfing the innermost planets completely. Verisa Prime, slightly above the equatorial plane, was partially spared direct impact, but the southern hemisphere was scoured by radiation and heat intense enough to boil oceans and melt continental plates. The evacuation fleet, having reached the outer system, weathered the edge of the shockwave. Many vessels were damaged, some destroyed, but the majority survived to carry their precious cargo of refugees into the void. As the initial fury subsided, the true extent of the devastation became clear. Where once the proud Zeleran Empire had stood at the height of its power, now only ruins remained. The homeworld was a scarred, broken shell of its former self. The military installations that had guaranteed Zeleran dominance for centuries were simply gone, erased from existence. On the bridge of the retribution, Selene Maris watched in silence, tears streaming down her face, for her lost homeworld, for the billions who had perished, and for the 42,000 souls on New Aurora, whose deaths had set this tragedy in motion. "It's over," General Ross said quietly. "Verisa will stabilize eventually, though it will never be the same. Some portions of your homeworld may remain habitable in time, once the radiation levels decrease." Selene nodded numbly. "And what happens now to the survivors, to those colonies that were outside the Verisa system?" Ross turned to face her directly. "That depends partly on you, Colonel. The Zeleran military and political leadership has been decimated. Your people will need to rebuild, to create something new from the ashes of the old empire. They'll need guidance from someone who understands both the mistakes of the past and the possibility of a different future." Selene frowned. "I don't understand. I'm your prisoner to be tried for war crimes." "Yes," Ross acknowledged. "And justice demands that those responsible for New Aurora face consequences. But justice without mercy is just another form of vengeance." He paused. "The Earth Alliance Council will want someone to help navigate the rebuilding of relations with what remains of the Zeleran people. Someone who has demonstrated both loyalty to her civilization and the moral courage to defy unjust orders when necessary. You would trust me with that responsibility after what I did?" It was Dr. Ellings who answered. "If there's one thing we've all learned from this tragedy, Colonel, it's that none of us has clean hands. You executed an unjust order against innocent colonists. We responded by destroying an entire star system. The cycle of violence has to end somewhere." For a long moment, Selene stared out at the ruins of her homeworld. The Zeleran Empire had valued strength above all else, defining that strength in terms of military might and dominance. But perhaps there were other forms of strength, the strength to acknowledge mistakes, to change course, to build, rather than destroy. "If I am given that opportunity," she said at last, "I would work to ensure that neither New Aurora nor Verisa ever happens again. That both our civilizations learn from this symmetry of devastation." Ross nodded solemnly. "Then perhaps something meaningful can emerge from all this death. A new understanding between our peoples. A recognition that the universe is vast enough for all of us, if we can only learn to coexist." As the Earth Alliance fleet prepared to depart the ravaged Verisa system, Selene Maris stood at the viewport of her temporary quarters aboard the Retribution. In the distance, evacuation ships carrying the remnants of her civilization scattered into the void, seeking refuge among the stars. The Zeleran Empire, as it had existed for centuries, was gone, but its people would survive, would adapt, would rebuild. And perhaps in that rebuilding, they would find a different path, one based not on domination, but on cooperation, not on fear, but on mutual respect. It would be a difficult journey, fraught with challenges and resistance from those who clung to the old ways. But it was a journey worth making. For if there was one lesson to be learned from the twin tragedies of New Aurora and Verisa. It was this, in the vast darkness of space. The light of civilization was too precious to sacrifice on the altar of pride or power. The true measure of a people's strength lay not in their ability to destroy, but in their capacity to create, to forgive, and ultimately to change. As Veresa receded into the distance, its wounded light still pulsing with the after-effects of Project Nemesis, Selene made a silent promise to the billions who had perished, both human and Zeleran. Their deaths would not be meaningless. From this symmetry of devastation, something new would arise. Something better. Something worthy of the stars themselves. And she would help build it, one painful step at a time.